Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship Intrepid, watching the massive alien space station grow larger on the viewing screen. Nexus Prime looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The station was the size of a small moon, covered in gleaming towers and spinning rings that caught the light from 3 different suns. "First time seeing something like this, Captain?" Dr. Lisa Bennett asked as she joined him at the front of the bridge. She was the team's expert on alien life forms and had been studying the Confederation species for months. "Nothing in our training prepared us for this," Jake replied, shaking his head. The Earth Defense Force had sent their best ship and crew for this historic first meeting with the Galactic Confederation. 200 alien species working together in peace. It sounded too good to be true. Admiral Frank Collins walked up behind them, his uniform crisp and his expression serious. "Remember, we're here to make friends. Earth needs allies out here. We're alone in a big, dangerous galaxy." Ambassador Helen Torres nodded from her seat near the communication station. She had been chosen to speak for all of humanity in these talks. The Confederation has been around for thousands of years. If we can join them, we'll have protection and trading partners. Our future depends on this. Jake watched as smaller alien ships moved around the station like busy insects. Some were long and thin like needles. Others were round like balls. A few looked like they were made of living coral that grew in strange patterns. Every ship was different, showing how many different species lived and worked together here. "Incoming message from Nexus Prime," the communications officer announced. "They're ready to receive our delegation." The docking process took an hour. Human technology seemed slow and clumsy compared to the smooth, silent movements of the alien ships around them. Jake noticed how the other vessels seemed to flow through space rather than push through it like human ships did. The delegation walked through corridors, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Jake tried not to stare at the floating jellyfish creatures or the tall beings that looked like walking trees. Dr. Bennett was taking notes as fast as she could, her eyes wide with excitement at seeing so many new life forms. The main council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of different aliens sat in rows that went up to the ceiling. At the center sat the High Council, 5 beings from the most powerful species in the Confederation. The leader was a tall, thin creature with blue skin and 4 arms. This was Vextar, a Zephyrian who had been in charge of the council for over 200 years, so Vextar said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "These are the humans we have heard about. The new species from the edge of the galaxy." Ambassador Torres stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Earth is honored to have this chance to join the Confederation." Sound like laughter came from around the chamber. Not friendly laughter, but the kind that made Jake's hands form fists at his sides. Vextar held up one of his 4 hands for silence. "Join us. You misunderstand your position, little human. We do not invite primitive species to join the Confederation. We're here to discuss what role Earth might play in serving our needs." Torres kept her voice calm and diplomatic. "I'm not sure I understand. We were told this was a meeting to discuss membership." Another council member, a creature that looked like a giant insect with jeweled wings, clicked its mandibles together. "Look at them, Vextar. They still wear metal armor, carry projectile weapons. Their ships burn chemical fuel to move through space. How primitive can they be?" "Indeed," Vextar agreed. "Our youngest children learn to manipulate energy fields before they can walk. Our warriors fight with pure thought and psychic force. What do humans do? They throw pieces of metal at each other." Jake felt his face getting hot with anger, but Admiral Collins put a hand on his shoulder to keep him calm. They had known this might happen. Earth's technology was different from what the Confederation used, but it worked just fine. Dr. Bennett stepped forward. "Our technology may be different, but we've achieved interstellar travel in only a few hundred years. That shows human determination and skill." The insect creature made a buzzing sound that might have been laughter. "Determination? You mean stubbornness? Skill? You mean the inability to evolve beyond barbaric methods?" Vextar stood up, his forearms spread wide. "Let me explain reality to you humans. The galaxy is not a safe place. There are dangers out there that would destroy your entire species without effort. The Confederation offers protection to useful worlds. In exchange, those worlds provide resources and labor. What kind of resources? Torres asked, though Jake could tell she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Your star system contains useful metals and energy sources. Your planet has water and can grow food. Your species is suitable for basic manual labor. In exchange for these contributions, we will protect Earth from the real threats in this galaxy. The chamber fell silent. Jake could feel the eyes of hundreds of alien beings watching them, waiting to see how the humans would respond to what was clearly not an offer but a demand. Torres straightened her shoulders. I appreciate the offer, but Earth is not interested in becoming a vassal world. Came here to discuss partnership, not servitude. The laughter that filled the chamber this time was louder and less friendly. Vextar's blue skin darkened too. A deeper shade, which Dr. Bennett had learned, meant amusement in Zephyrian body language. Partnership, Vextar said. What could primitives like you offer to civilized beings like us? Your crude weapons? Your primitive ships? Your barbaric military tactics that involve actually killing your enemies? Jake couldn't stay quiet anymore. Those barbaric tactics have kept humanity alive for thousands of years. Against other primitives on your own world, the insect creature buzzed. Wait until you face real military forces. Species that have fought wars across star systems for millions of years. Your little metal bullets and chemical explosives will be useless. Vextar sat back down, clearly enjoying himself. Here's what will happen, humans. You will return to your little world and think about our generous offer. When you encounter the real dangers of this galaxy, you will come crawling back, begging for our protection. And we will still be here, willing to accept your service in exchange for keeping your species alive. Ambassador Torres bowed again, her face showing no emotion. Thank you for your time. We will certainly consider everything you have said. The human delegation left the chamber. Jake could hear the aliens still laughing behind them. Dr. Bennett walked beside him, her earlier excitement replaced by quiet anger. You think we're nothing but primitive barbarians, she said quietly. Admiral? Collins nodded grimly. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Let them underestimate us. Humans have always done their best work when everyone else counted them out. Jake looked back once at the massive council chamber as they walked away.
Ow.
The aliens were still talking and laughing, probably already forgetting about the primitive humans from the edge of the galaxy. That would turn out to be their biggest mistake. 6 months after the failed meeting at Nexus Prime, Captain Jake Morrison was back on Earth, training new pilots for the Defense Force. The humiliation from the Confederation still burned in his memory. But Admiral Collins had told everyone to focus on building Earth's defenses. They were on their own in the galaxy. The first news of trouble came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was running flight simulations in her experimental fighter called the Viper when the emergency alert sounded across the base. All senior staff to the command center immediately. The announcement echoed through the corridors. Jake ran to the command center where Admiral Collins was staring at a massive display screen showing the galaxy. Red dots were appearing across Confederation space, one after another. What are we looking at? Jake asked. General Sam Parker, Earth's top military strategist, pointed to the display. Confederation worlds are going dark. 23 planets. In the last 2 weeks, no distress calls, no survivors, nothing. Dr. Lisa Bennett was studying data streams on her tablet. The Confederation sent a message to all their member worlds. They're calling it the Korthok invasion. Who are the Korthoks? Jake asked. A species from the outer rim of the galaxy, Dr. Bennett explained. They've been quiet for centuries, building their strength. Now they're moving toward the center of the galaxy, conquering everything in their path. Another screen showing intercepted Confederation military communications. Look at this. The Confederation's response has been a complete disaster. Their forces are being destroyed so fast they can barely send reports. Commander Kate Sullivan, who led the Mars Defense Fleet, leaned over the tactical display. How is that possible? The Confederation has thousands of ships and advanced technology. General Parker switched the display to show battle recordings that had been intercepted from Confederation sources. Watch this. This is from the Battle of Kepler Station 3 days ago. The screen showed Confederation ships moving in perfect formations, their energy shields glowing bright blue. They fired beams of pure energy at approaching enemies. The Korthok ships looked different from anything they had seen before. They were dark, organic-looking vessels that seemed to be alive, rather than built. The Confederation ships are following their standard battle protocols, General Parker explained. Shields up, long-range energy weapons, trying to disable rather than destroy. They're fighting like it's a training exercise. On the screen, the Korthok ships moved through the energy beams without slowing down. When they reached the Confederation vessels, they released clouds of something that made the energy shields flicker and die. Bioweapons, Dr. Bennett said quietly. The Korthoks are using living organisms as weapons. Confederation's energy shields are useless against them. The battle was over in minutes. The Confederation ships tried to retreat, but the Korthok vessels were faster. None of the Confederation ships escaped. They're not just defeating the Confederation, Admiral Collins said grimly. They're destroying them completely. No prisoners, no survivors. Chief Engineer Pete Johnson, who designed most of Earth's military technology, was studying the technical data. The Confederation fights like they're playing a game with rules. The Korthoks fight like they want to wipe out everything that isn't them. Lieutenant Rodriguez raised her hand. Sir, what does this mean for Earth? Admiral Collins switched the display to show the Korthok advance. The red dots showing conquered worlds were moving in a clear pattern toward the center of the galaxy. Earth was directly in their path. Intelligence reports suggest the Korthoks will reach the Sol system in about 6 weeks, he said. They probably see us as an easy target. Primitive world that will fall without a fight. General Parker pulled up Earth's defensive capabilities. We have 200 ships in the defense force. Most are patrol vessels and cargo haulers converted. For military use, against the Korthok fleet, we're looking at odds of about 50-1. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. Has the Confederation offered any help? Commander Sullivan asked. Admiral Collins shook his head. We received one message from Nexus Prime. It was a warning to evacuate Earth immediately. They said the Korthoks cannot be stopped by primitive technology. Evacate to where? Jake asked. They made it clear we're not welcome in Confederation. Space. Exactly, Admiral Collins replied. We're on our own. Dr. Bennett was still studying the battle recordings. There's something else. Look at how the Korthoks fight. They don't use energy weapons like the Confederation. They use biological and chemical attacks. Physical force. Fight more like ... double quotes. Like humans, General Parker finished. Crude, direct, and brutal. Lieutenant Rodriguez stood up. Her request permission to begin combat training immediately. If we're going to fight these things, we need to be ready. Permission granted, Admiral Collins said. But understand, this isn't going to be like anything we've trained for. The Korthoks have been conquering worlds for centuries. They have numbers, experience, and technology we don't understand. Chief Johnson raised his hand. What about our weapons? Their bioweapons can get through energy shields? What happens when they hit our armor? We'll find out, General Parker said. But our ships are built differently than Confederation vessels. We use thick metal armor instead of energy shields, kinetic weapons instead of energy beams. Maybe that will make a difference. Jake looked around the room at the faces of his fellow officers. He saw fear, but also determination. Earth had always been a world where survival meant fighting for everything. Admiral, he said, what do we tell the civilians? Admiral Collins thought for a moment. The truth, that we're facing an enemy that has destroyed every force sent against them. That we're outnumbered and outgunned. But also that we're not the Confederation. We don't fight by their rules. 2 weeks later, the first Korthok scout ships appeared at the edge of the Sol system. They sent the same message they had sent to every world before attacking. Surrender immediately and serve the Korthok Empire. Be destroyed. Admiral Collins recorded Earth's response personally. This is Admiral Frank Collins of the Earth Defense Force. We have received your surrender demand. Here is our reply. Earth does not surrender. If you want our world, you'll have to take it from us. The Korthok scouts disappeared back into deep space, presumably to report that the primitive humans had chosen to fight rather than surrender. Based on their experience with the Confederation, The Korthoks probably expected the battle for Earth to last a few hours at most. Lieutenant Rodriguez was in her fighter, running final checks on her weapon systems. The Viper was loaded with missiles, bullets, and even some experimental weapons that Earth's engineers had been working on. Not the elegant energy weapons of the Confederation, but crude, effective tools of war. "All pilots, this is Rodriguez," she said over the comm system. "In a few weeks, we're going to show these aliens what happens when they mess with humans. We might not have their fancy technology, but we have something they don't." "What's that?" another pilot asked. "We have nothing left to lose," she replied. "Ah!" "And humans fight hardest when they're backed into a corner." "Ah!" The Korthok invasion fleet was already on its way to Sol System. 10,000 bioships against Earth's 200 vessels. On paper, it looked like a massacre waiting to happen, but the Korthoks had never fought humans before. They were about to learn that primitive didn't mean weak. It meant desperate. And desperate humans were the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The Korthok invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Jupiter, like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, watching the enemy ships spread across his viewing screen. There were so many that the computer stopped counting at 8,000. "My God," whispered his weapons officer. "How are we supposed to fight that?" Jake activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Morrison. Remember what we talked about? They expect us to fight like the Confederation. Neat formations. Long-range energy weapons. Polite warfare. We're going to give them something different." Admiral Collins's voice came through the comm from Earth. "Jake, the enemy commander, is broadcasting on all frequencies. Might want to hear this." The alien voice was deep and harsh, speaking through a translation device. "Primitive humans of the third planet, I am War Leader Gorthok of the Korthok Empire. We have conquered 200 worlds without losing a single ship. Your pathetic fleet cannot harm us. Surrender now, and we will allow some of you to live as slaves." Jake smiled grimly and opened a channel back to the Korthok commander. "War Leader Gorthak, this is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We've seen what you did to the Confederation worlds. Here's our answer. Come and get us." The Korthok response was immediate. Their bioships moved forward in a massive wave, expecting the human ships to retreat or try to fight at long range like every other species they had faced. Instead, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez led her fighter squadron straight at the enemy fleet. "All fighters, follow my lead. We're going." In close and personal, her Viper fighter dove between two massive Korthok bioships, firing missiles and bullets at point-blank range. The alien vessels tried to release their bioweapons, but Rodriguez was moving too fast and too close for their weapons to track her. "Rodriguez, what are you doing?" Admiral Collins shouted over the comm. "That's suicide." "No, sir," she replied, rolling her fighter to avoid a blast of acid that melted the space where she had been a second before. "This is human fighter tactics. We learned this from pilots who fought in Earth's wars." The other human pilots followed her lead, flying in patterns that would have been considered insane by Confederation standards. They flew directly at enemy ships, dodging between them, attacking from angles that should have been impossible. The Korthoks had never seen anything like it. Their bioships were designed to fight enemies who kept their distance and followed predictable patterns. These human fighters were everywhere at once, striking and disappearing like angry wasps. Captain Morrison brought the Intrepid and the other human warships into the battle, using tactics that made the Korthok commanders panic. Instead of trying to match the enemy's superior firepower, human ships worked in small groups, using asteroids and debris for cover. "Target their command ship," Morrison ordered, all ships ramming speed. "Sir?" his helmsman asked. "Did you say ramming speed? You heard me? If we can't outgun them, we'll out-crazy them." The Intrepid accelerated directly toward the largest Korthok bioship, firing everything it had. The alien vessel tried to move out of the way, but Morrison had calculated its movement perfectly. At the last second, he ordered all power to the forward shields and rammed the enemy ship. The collision tore both ships apart. But not before Morrison's crew had launched escape pods. The destruction of the Korthok command ship threw their entire formation into chaos. Dr. Emma Foster, working in a secret laboratory on Earth, watched the battle through long-range sensors while putting the finishing touches on her latest creation. "If they want to use bioweapons," she muttered, "let's see how they like some real chemistry." She activated the communication system. "Morrison, this is Foster. I'm launching supply pods with some special presents. Make sure they get delivered to the enemy." The supply pods contained weapons that the Confederation would have considered barbaric. Chemical explosives, biological agents, and radioactive materials that could destroy living tissue. When the human ships delivered these weapons to the Korthok bioships, the results were devastating. The Korthoks discovered that their living ships were vulnerable to the same kinds of weapons that humans had been using to kill each other for thousands of years. Their bioarmor dissolved under chemical attacks. Their organic weapon systems died when exposed to radiation. Colonel Reek Hayes was leading the defense of Earth's surface when the first Korthok landing ships broke through the orbital battle. He prepared for this by studying every war that humans had ever fought. Remember, he told his soldiers over the radio? "These aliens expect us to surrender when they land. Every other species has done that. We're going to show them that humans don't give up." The Korthok ground forces were expecting to face the same kind of token resistance they had encountered on Confederation worlds. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that had turned every building into a fortress and every street into a battlefield. Major Betty Clark led guerrilla attacks using tactics borrowed from Earth's history. Her teams used improvised explosives, sniper attacks, and hit-and-run tactics that drove the Korthok commanders to desperation. "They fight like animals," one captured Korthok soldier was heard saying. "They hide in the ruins of their own cities. They attack from sewers and basements. They use their own dead as traps." Captain Tony Miller, who had studied submarine warfare, adapted those tactics for fighting in the ruins of human cities. His teams moved through underground tunnels, striking at enemy positions and disappearing before the Korthoks could respond. The aliens had weapons that could level city blocks, but they found it impossible to fight an enemy that refused to stand still and be killed. Every human casualty seemed to make the others fight harder instead of giving up. Back in space, the battle was turning into a nightmare for the Korthok fleet. They had lost over half their ships to an enemy they had expected to destroy in minutes. The surviving Korthok commanders were sending desperate messages back to their empire. "The humans fight without honor," one message said. "They use weapons that kill indiscriminately. They sacrifice themselves to destroy our ships. They cannot be reasoned with or intimidated." Lieutenant Rodriguez, her fighter badly damaged but still flying, led the final attack on the Korthok fleet commander's ship. "This is for every world you destroyed," she said, firing her last missiles at point-blank range. The explosion took out both her fighter and the enemy command ship, but it broke the back of the Korthok invasion. Without central command, their bioships began retreating toward the edge of the Sol system. Admiral Collins, coordinating the battle from Earth, couldn't believe what he was seeing. "They're running. The Korthoks are actually retreating." "Colonel," Hayes reported from the surface. "Enemy ground forces are withdrawing to their landing ships. They're abandoning equipment and wounded. I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Foster was analyzing the battlefield data. "According to these numbers, we destroyed over 4,000 enemy ships and killed nearly 60% of their invasion. Force, our losses were heavy, but nothing compared to what they suffered." Jake Morrison, floating in his escape pod and watching the Korthok fleet flee, activated his emergency communicator. "All human forces, this is Morrison. We did it. We actually did it. We stopped the unstoppable Korthok Empire." The news of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. On Nexus Prime, the Confederation leadership watched the battle reports in stunned silence. The primitive humans had accomplished what their advanced civilization could not. They had defeated the Korthoks in open battle. Vexstar, the Zephyrion who had mocked humanity 6 months earlier, stared at the tactical displays showing the destruction of the Korthok invasion fleet. How is this possible? They used crude weapons and barbaric tactics. An aide brought him the latest intelligence reports. "Sir, the Korthaks are in full retreat. Their surviving forces are fleeing back to the Outer Rim. They're telling other species that humans are too dangerous to attack." For the first time in his 200-year life, Vexstar began to understand that there might be more than one way to survive in a dangerous galaxy. The humans had just proven that sometimes being primitive meant being prepared for the kind of war that civilized species couldn't imagine fighting on Earth. Survivors were counting their losses and beginning to rebuild. But they had proven something important. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humans didn't surrender. They fought back with everything they had, using whatever weapons they could find. The galaxy was about to learn that primitive didn't mean weak. It meant dangerous. News of humanity's victory over the Korthax spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On the Confederation capital world of Nexus Prime, emergency sessions were being held around the clock. Species that had never experienced real warfare were trying to understand how the primitive humans had accomplished the impossible. Ambassador Helen Torres found herself in a very different position than 6 months ago. The same council chamber where she had been humiliated was now packed with alien diplomats, all wanting to speak with Earth's representative. Ambassador Torres, Vexstar said, his forearms trembling slightly, we have received disturbing reports from across Confederation space. Other aggressive species are beginning to move against our worlds. They seem to believe that if the Korthox could be defeated, then we are not as protected as we appeared. Dr. Nina Brooks was working around the clock in her new position as Earth's tactical analyst. Her job was to study the weaknesses that humanity had discovered in both Korthok and Confederation military doctrine. The results were shocking. The entire galactic military system is based on the idea that everyone follows the same rules. She explained to Admiral Collins during a video call from Earth. Energy shields, stun weapons, battles that end when one side retreats. Nobody has prepared for total warfare. Commander Alex Wright was leading the reconstruction efforts on Earth when the first requests for help arrived. The messages came from Confederation worlds under attack by species that had seen the Korthok defeat and decided to try their own luck at conquest. Sir, his aide reported, we have 17 different species asking for military advisors. They're offering technology, resources, even entire star systems in exchange for human military knowledge. Admiral Collins was studying reports from across the galaxy. Confederation's careful balance of power was collapsing. Species that had been peaceful for centuries were suddenly discovering that their neighbors had been watching and waiting for signs of weakness. Captain Joe Davis had been promoted to lead Earth's first expeditionary force. His ships were converted civilian vessels, armed with the same crude weapons that had proven so effective against the Korthox. His mission was to help defend the Zephyrian homeworld from an attack by the Ravik Collective. I never thought I'd be fighting to protect the same aliens who called us primitive, he told his crew as they approached the Zephyrian system. But that's what allies do. The Ravik ships were similar to Confederation vessels, built for elegant long-range combat. They had watched the reports of the Korthok invasion and decided that the Confederation was weak enough to conquer. Had not expected to face human tactics, Davis ordered his ships to use the same close-range combat that had worked against the Korthox. The Ravik commanders were completely unprepared for enemies that flew directly at their weapons, used ramming attacks, and seemed to prefer destruction over retreat. What are these creatures? One Ravik captain was heard saying over intercepted communications. They fight like they want to die. Major Rachel Stone was developing psychological warfare techniques specifically designed for alien minds. She had discovered that most galactic species were not prepared for the kind of mental pressure that came with total warfare. Most of these aliens have never seen real violence, she explained to her team. Their wars are like games with rules. When they face an enemy that doesn't follow those rules, they break down psychologically. Her teams use propaganda broadcasts, fake surrenders, and terror tactics that left enemy commanders unable to function. Species that had conquered worlds through intimidation found themselves terrified of an enemy that seemed to welcome death. Dr. Emma Foster was working with Confederation scientists to develop new weapons based on human military technology. The aliens were horrified by the effectiveness of simple chemical explosives and kinetic weapons. You put explosive chemicals in a metal container and throw it at the enemy. A Confederation scientist asked, studying a human grenade. That's so crude, it's actually brilliant. Our energy shields can't stop physical objects moving at high speed. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Torres was negotiating a new treaty with the Confederation leadership. The balance of power had shifted completely. Earth was no longer asking to join the Confederation as a junior member. They were being begged to become protectors. "What do you want in return for your military assistance?" Vexstar asked, his earlier. Arrogance completely gone. "Equality," Torres replied simply. "We want to be treated as equals, not primitives. We want fair trade agreements and respect for human sovereignty. And we want guarantees that Earth will never be threatened by Confederation members." Commander Wright was leading human forces on 3 different worlds where the local defenses had collapsed under attack. His soldiers were teaching alien civilians how to fight using human tactics. The results were remarkable. "Turns out that most species can learn to fight effectively," he reported to Earth. "They just never had to before. Give them proper training and motivation, and they become formidable." Captain Davis returned from the Zephyrian campaign with news that shocked the galaxy. His small human fleet had not only defeated the Ravik Collective, but had completely destroyed their invasion force. More importantly, they had done it while protecting Zephyrian civilians. "The locals couldn't believe it," Davis reported. "They kept asking why we risked human lives to save aliens who had insulted us. I told them that's what decent people do." The psychological impact of human military success was spreading beyond just military matters. Species across the galaxy were beginning to question their assumptions about strength, civilization, and what it meant to be advanced. Dr. Brooks was analyzing intelligence reports from across Confederation space. "The aggressive species are starting to avoid any system. With human defenders," she told Admiral Collins, "word is spreading that attacking humans leads to total destruction, not conquest." Major Stone's psychological warfare teams were being requested by species across the galaxy. They had discovered that the mere threat of facing human military tactics was enough to deter most aggressors. "We're not just winning battles," she explained. "We're changing how the entire galaxy thinks about warfare. They're realizing that their civilized approach only works when everyone agrees to be civilized." The final test came when a massive alliance of 12 aggressive species decided to attack the Confederation capital directly. They believed that even with human help, the primitive Earthers couldn't protect the entire galactic government. They were wrong. Admiral Collins personally led the defense of Nexus Prime, bringing the largest human fleet ever assembled into battle. The enemy alliance had over 2,000 ships and expected an easy victory over the mixed human and Confederation forces. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the enemy alliance had been completely destroyed. Not a single attacking ship escaped to tell the story of their defeat. Vexstar stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, watching human ships patrol the space around his homeworld. The same species he had mocked as primitive were now the only reason his civilization still existed. "How did we get it so wrong?" he asked Ambassador Torres, who was standing beside him. Torres watched a human destroyer escort a group of Confederation cargo ships to safety. "You assumed that advanced technology made you advanced as a species. You forgot that survival isn't about having the best tools. It's about being willing to use whatever tools you have." A8 approached with the latest reports from across the galaxy, Ambassador. "We're receiving surrender offers from 18 different aggressive species. They're all asking for peace terms rather than risk fighting human forces." Torres nodded. "Send them the standard response. Earth will accept their surrender, but only if they agree to respect Confederation law and pay reparations to the worlds they attacked." Vexstar looked at the human ambassador with something that might have been respect. 6 months ago, I thought your species was too primitive to be useful. Now you're dictating terms to half the galaxy." "We're not dictating anything," Torres replied. "We're just making it clear that aggression has consequences. Something this galaxy seems to have forgotten." As the stars began to appear in Nexus Prime's artificial night cycle, Torres could see human ships continuing their patrols. The primitive species from the edge of the galaxy had become the guardians of galactic civilization, and everyone knew that the galaxy was a safer place because of it. 1 year after the Korthok invasion, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Defender. Watching the final Korthok surrender ceremony taking place on their homeworld, the once mighty empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds was now broken and defeated. Begging for mercy from the species they had once considered easy prey, General Linda Murphy, commander of the Human Expeditionary Force, stood beside the Korthok war leader as he signed the surrender documents. The alien who had once boasted about conquering Earth in hours was now a broken creature, his bioarmor scarred from the final battle for his homeworld. The Korthak Empire surrenders all territorial claims and agrees to pay reparations to the worlds we attacked, the war leader said in a voice barely above a whisper. We also agree to provide information about other aggressive species in the Outer Rim. Murphy nodded curtly. Your people will be relocated to the 3 worlds designated by the Confederation Council. Any attempt to rebuild your military forces will result in immediate action by human peacekeeping forces. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Helen Torres was putting the finishing touches on the Galactic Defense Treaty, a document that would reshape how the galaxy protected itself from aggression. The treaty established Earth as the primary military protector of Confederation space, with human forces stationed on key worlds throughout the galaxy. The old system failed because it assumed everyone would play by the same rules, she explained to the Confederation Council. The new system acknowledges that some species only understand force. Human forces will provide that force when necessary. Admiral Susan Taylor was overseeing the construction of the first Human Military Academy on Nexus Prime. The massive facility would train officers from across the galaxy in human military tactics and philosophy. Species that had never known real warfare were learning the harsh lessons that humanity had learned through thousands of years of conflict. War is not a game, she told her first class of alien cadets. It's not about honor or tradition or following rules. It's about survival. When your people are threatened, you do whatever it takes to protect them. Captain Doug Peterson was leading a patrol fleet through the Outer Rim territories, while hunting down the remnants of aggressive species that still thought they could prey on peaceful worlds. His ships moved through space like hunting wolves, efficient and deadly. Contact ahead, his sensor officer reported. 3 ships attacking a Confederation colony on Kepler 7. Peterson smiled grimly. All ships, battle stations. Let's remind these pirates what happens when they threaten innocent people. The pirate ships were from the Scarix Confederacy, a species that had been raiding Confederation worlds for decades. They had always retreated when faced with serious resistance, but they had never faced human forces before. The battle was over in minutes. The Scarix ships were destroyed or captured, and the colony was saved. Peterson's report would become another entry in the growing list of human military victories that kept aggressive species awake at night. Dr. Carl White was working with scientists from across the galaxy to develop new, defensive technologies based on human military principles. The laboratory on Earth had become a center of innovation, where alien technology was combined with human tactical thinking to create weapons and defenses that no aggressor could overcome. The key is redundancy, he explained to a group of Confederation engineers. Humans learned long ago not to rely on a single defensive system. We use multiple layers of protection, each one designed to stop different types of attacks. Major Betty Clark was training resistance fighters on a dozen different worlds, teaching them the guerrilla warfare tactics that had proven so effective against the Korthoks. Species that had never considered fighting back against invaders were learning that they didn't have to be helpless victims. Remember, she told a group of Altarian civilians, you don't have to win every battle. You just have to make the enemy pay such a high price that they give up and go away. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Vexstar was working alongside Captain Peterson to coordinate the defense of the entire sector. The alien who had once mocked humanity's primitive nature was now learning human tactical doctrine and finding it remarkably effective. I still don't understand how you think of these strategies, Vexstar admitted as they reviewed defensive plans. Your tactics seem chaotic and brutal, but they work better than anything we ever developed. Peterson looked at the tactical display showing human ships protecting Zephyrian trade routes. We learned from necessity. Every human war taught us something new about fighting and surviving. You never had to learn those lessons because your galaxy was peaceful. Colonel Rick Hayes was establishing the final human garrison on the former Korthok homeworld, ensuring that the defeated empire could never rise again. His soldiers worked alongside former enemies, helping to rebuild the worlds that had been devastated by the Korthok expansion. Strange, one of his lieutenants observed. A year ago, these aliens were trying to conquer the galaxy. Now they're asking us for help rebuilding their cities. Hayes nodded. That's what happens when you show strength and mercy at the same time. Fear makes them stop fighting. Kindness makes them want to be better. Commander Kate Sullivan was overseeing the integration of human and alien technologies in the new generation of Confederation defense ships. The vessels combined human tactical systems with alien energy sources and materials, creating a fleet that was more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. These ships represent a new era, she told the mixed human and alien crews. We're not just defending individual worlds anymore. We're protecting the entire galaxy from those who would destroy peace and freedom. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, now promoted to colonel, was leading the first joint human-alien fighter squadron in combat operations. Her pilots included members of 12 different species, all trained in human fighter tactics. Today we patrol the Andorian sector, she announced to her squadron. Intelligence reports suggest the Hegemony Raiders are planning an attack on the art mining colonies. Our job is to make sure they think twice about it. The raiders never appeared. Word had spread throughout the criminal underworld that attacking any world protected by human forces was suicide. The mere presence of human defenders was enough to deter most aggressors. Back on Earth, Admiral Collins was reviewing the final reports from the Galactic Defense Initiative. In 1 year, human forces had stopped 17 different aggressive species, prevented 43 invasions, and established peace in regions that had known conflict for centuries. Sir, his aide reported, we're receiving requests for human military advisors from species outside Confederation space. Even non-aligned worlds want our protection. Collins looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed since that humiliating meeting on Nexus Prime. Put together a proposal for expanding our operations. If there are people out there who need protection, we'll provide it. Ambassador Torres was concluding the final session of the Galactic Defense Council when a message arrived from Earth. The transmission showed crowds of humans celebrating the first annual Galaxy Day, a holiday dedicated to commemorating the friendship between Earth and the Confederation. 1 year ago, she told the assembled alien delegates, you called us primitive. You thought our technology was crude and our methods barbaric. You were right about one thing. We are different from you. But being different doesn't mean being inferior. She gestured to the display showing human ships patrolling throughout the galaxy, protecting peaceful worlds from aggression. We learned to fight not because we wanted to, but because we had to. Now we use that knowledge to protect those who can't protect themselves. Vexstar stood up from his seat in the council chamber. Ambassador Torres, I owe your species an apology. We judged you based on your technology rather than your character. We thought civilization meant avoiding conflict. But you've taught us that sometimes civilization means being willing to fight for what's right. Torres smiled. Apology accepted. But remember this lesson. Don't judge a species by how advanced their weapons are. Judge them by how they use those weapons and what they're willing to fight for. As the council session ended, Torres looked out at the stars through the massive windows of Nexus Prime. Human ships moved between the alien vessels like guardians, protecting a galaxy that had once dismissed them as primitives. The species that was supposed to be too backward to matter had become the one thing the galaxy couldn't survive without. Protectors who were strong enough to fight and wise enough to know when fighting was necessary. In the end, being primitive hadn't made humanity weak. It had made them exactly what the galaxy needed. Warriors who fought for peace, protectors who understood the true cost of freedom, and guardians who would never let the innocent suffer while they had the power to help. The humans had proven that. Sometimes the best defense of civilization came from those who understood what it meant to fight for survival,